Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another live. It is Saturday, and I wanted to talk about something that I have up on the screen right now, which is I went to a bar the other day, and I had asked the person at the table just because I was curious, because I'm always in marketing, so I'm always thinking about how did people find this place? What was the journey that person took to find this business? I'm always curious about attribution, specifically because you can never predict things. You can never guess how somebody did something. If you do, that's very dangerous. And oftentimes, like when you're in marketing and when you're in digital, you do a lot of guessing, you do a lot of guesswork. I've made comments before about how most marketing is like literally going into a casino, and you actually will make more money gambling your money than you will with advertising and digital. So I walked up to the party and it was a group of people. And I had asked them, just really curious, how did you find out about this place? And the girl looked up at me and she said, I use ChatGPT. So then my follow up question was, what did you type in? And her query was unbelievable. And it wasn't a keyword, it wasn't restaurant near me, it wasn't brewery near me, it wasn't best places for food near me. The question was a full on sentence. And the sentence was very specific to what she wanted. And she used voice to do it because it was quicker. So, like on your phone, you can go on your phone and you can like talk to your phone and you can quickly ask it a question. That's what she did. And that led her to the discovery of this new brand. Now, to someone like me who's obsessed with this stuff, and granted, why I'm spending time on a Saturday to do this, it sent chills down my bones because it made me realize what we're doing is fundamentally changing. And AI has a lot to do with that. So I thought, I'm going to make a video. I'm going to put it together a presentation about this exact situation. And I have that presentation here for you guys to watch today. And so I can't wait to go over that with you. But I did the same exercise at the same place a week later. And I asked the ownership, I asked, how do you think those people found you? And of course, not to their detriment, because we all do this. I do this. They said, I have no idea. They're probably a birthday party. When I went up to the table, it was actually that they were a roller skating club and they were looking for breweries that they can have people, multiple people come to that location. So, anyways, AEO, answer engine optimization, has been a top priority in my mind because I really believe that's how people are going to find information in the near future. For example, I used to ask people when the last time that they use Google. So I would ask you, when was the last time you used Google? And the person would say, probably a couple hours ago, today, definitely today. And now I'm asking people, when was the last time you used ChatGPT? And they say all day. And so these people are using ChatGPT all day, which is a gold mine of opportunity for people like yourself that are doing digital marketing to get your brand recommended. And so if you're in marketing, a key thing here is showing people how often you're being recommended and communicating that because you may not even know how many times you're being recommended. And so it's really important that you're not flying blind. And so let's get to it. I have a little presentation here ready to go. And I titled it AEO for local. Now, the reason why I'm calling it AEO, just so you guys are aware, because there's a couple of different names that you can utilize this information. But when you open up the ChatGPT screen, the first thing that you see on the screen is actually the question that says, ask a question and then basically ask anything, right? And so to have a question, you need an answer. And so that's why I'm calling it answer engine optimization. That's the word that I use for it. There's a ton of words that you can use for it. But let's get to the presentation. So to start, we're going to go through a couple of the things like I do in most of my live streams, which actually is some insight related things that you should know. The single goal. Your single goal is to focus on the 20% of the work that drives 80% of the results. Here's the thing, the clients and the stakeholders that you're working with are going to hold you accountable regardless for what you're doing. So the minimum solution should be a painkiller in the short term, but a long-term cure for the underlying problem long term. The actual there is because if you think about this, no matter what you do, whether it's a blog, whether it's a video, whether it's an ad, whether it's a photo, doesn't matter what you do, you're going to be held accountable to the result. And so if you're selling this services, if you're doing digital marketing, or if you work somewhere, if you're doing it as an agency, what you've got to realize is you need to become outcome focused. And specifically what that means is when someone comes to you, they have a specific goal in mind. And that goal is generally to receive X or to their short-term and long-term problem, whatever that is. So regardless of the deliverable that you do, you're held accountable to that. So I'm going to talk a lot about in the near future, the 20% of what those deliverables are. For us, for Develomark, it is the website, it is the media, and it is the advertising. Everything outside of that account management, anything along those lines, blog articles, internal linking, all of these little technical minutiae are really not the MVP that we do. So we're really trying to focus more on the MVP at the company. So that's kind of the first thing. The second thing is commoditization versus value. And I give this talk to my team every time I talk to them because the introduction of AI has made it 90% of marketing tasks a commodity. People are going to pay less for tasks, but they'll continue to pay for the outcomes. So in all of the conversations that I have, I really focus in on the outcomes and reverse engineer the services. So what that could sound like is you don't want to ask people what they want. People don't know what they want. You literally want to try to read their minds ahead of time. You really want to think about what they want in the future and just focus on that. Because the moment you start asking people what they want, you become commoditized. If the client's telling you, I want a blog article this month, can we do that? Yes and no, right? Understand, Mr. Client, that by doing that, you're taking time away from this. The ad is going to reach 500,000 people. The blog article, based on your analytics, no one's clicking on that. So why are we going to spend time and energy on the 80% of the things that don't actually get us results? And by the way, that's how you say no to people. I know that creatives have a really hard time saying no to people because it's difficult to say no. I understand. Trust me, I'm the same way as a creative. But the way that I've gotten around it is this is the 20% that's going to move the needle for you. And I can show you guys what that is in today's presentation. The 80% of that, while that's cool, and you may have read an article about it, and you may have seen a video about somebody saying why it's important, we can't do everything at once. A brand is about making decisions. And the decisions that you make are going to be the things that give you the result. For example, Cracker Barrel made a mistake, or not a mistake, I'm sorry, made a decision. Whether it was a mistake is up to you or not. Personally, I liked their new logo. However, Cracker Barrel made a big decision when they decided to remove the mascot from their logo. That's what makes the brand. That is the 20% of the things that gets them results. And so that's why there was a big ruckus. There's so many 80% of the things that they're doing that no one even cares about. So consider what you're doing right now that's commoditized versus actually providing value. There's things that AI can't do right now, which is what I'm doing right now, live streaming on YouTube. But an AI can create 400 different blog articles on a website and schedule them for me. So what value is there really that I'm bringing to somebody to do that? That doesn't mean that that's not going to get you to the outcome. Blogging and content writing is still a critical part of the overall strategy. But you really want to think about going into 2026, what can AI do and what can I do? And you need to focus on what you can do. Because what the AI can do is that's just busy work. The difference between busy and productive is productive has everlasting effects. Busy work, people like to make themselves busy really just because they're depressed. Productive work is what happy people do. The difference between depression and happiness is busy is depressed. So if you want to be in the happy zone and you want to do things that are actually going to move the needle, I would recommend focusing on productivity. They're two very different things. When people come up to me and they go, I know you're so busy, I stop them and I actually say, that's not true. I'm not busy. I'm trying to be productive. When I'm busy, I really know that I'm not having a good time. And I know why I'm busy because I'm trying to avoid the productive work. The productive work is having a difficult conversation. It's pressing that record button. It's sending that email. It's making a decision. That's the productive work. The busy work is sitting on a computer and doing the technical work that AI could just be doing for you. So knowing the differences is really critical. So let's go back to it. Then the third thing is keywords data decline. So I just got a little philosophical there, but I'm going to go back to kind of what the topic of the conversation is that traditional search engine optimization strategies like finding keywords is outdated. Businesses should focus on their data and not publicly available data. In essence, online competitors can access that data easily as well. When you think about that, right? If you're using keyword research tools, and there's no problem with that, I encourage it. You just can't rely on a long-term strategy for that. Recall that I had just mentioned that your brand is made up of making difficult decisions. It's made up of saying no versus saying yes. The only difference between an art museum and what they decide to put on a wall versus your website is they have curated that stuff that's on the wall, meaning they said no to a lot of things. And the 5 things that are on that wall, they said yes to. The only difference between curation and adding is that adding is just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what people like. Curation is saying no a ton of times. So I want to encourage you to curate your decisions and curate your brand and curate your clients' brands if you're doing client work. The critical part here is that competitors are not going to have access to your data. You want to utilize that data to your advantage, as I'm going to show you in the presentation. What that looks like is focusing on keywords or mention and terms and things like that that keyword data tools might say there's zero, or focusing on your contact form submissions and how you can generate ideas based on that, listening to your phone calls and generating ideas based on that, looking at your lookalike audience, your meta targeting list, and focusing on things like that. That's very difficult for your competition to copy. But looking at a keyword on a big SEO tool and writing an article based on that keyword to target that, you're going into a sea of other people that are trying to do the same exact thing because that data is publicly available. So be careful with that. The difference between adding and curating is when you curate, you say no a lot. And you really look at the things that are unique to you, just like an art painting on a museum's wall. So as we curate a lot of our digital marketing strategy, we're focusing on 20%, not the 80% of the work that can technically get done by anybody in the world. We really want to focus on what makes you, you. So something actually really interesting that I heard this morning, now that we're kind of talking about curation, is the Pope asked Michelangelo, how in the world did he create the statue of David? And Michelangelo responded that all he simply did was removed everything that was not David. And that really gave me the chills as I listened to that, because I thought about that really deeply. And I thought about our jobs as digital marketers, our jobs as marketing professionals is to do what Michelangelo did to the statue of David. It's to take that business and curate everything that it is and remove everything that it is not. Oftentimes, when we get a client or we do our own marketing, it's so tempting to put things that we want to be on our marketing because we want to display an image that just is simply not true. And you can't blame people for lying, because lying is how people get places. Lying is a fundamental survival skill. If you didn't lie and you were your authentic self over and over and over again, people probably wouldn't like you. So lying, we've learned at a young age that it is how we get places. The true authenticity comes from you being you. So the balls on Michelangelo to do that, and God knows the balls on David versus Goliath situation, but the balls on Michelangelo to actually do that and communicate at that level is why he was the artist he was. So just a little topic there on that. So let's go through it. GPT search is killing it right now. As you guys know, a lot of our clients are saying to us that they're getting customers that are finding them directly through ChatGPT. Now, I want to be super, super clear with you guys that the reason why I mentioned ChatGPT so much is because if you were to walk down the street and ask anybody on the planet what AI they know of, they're all going to say ChatGPT. It's very similar to the Google effect, which is in 2006, if you asked what search engine people use, they're going to say Google. I don't like to focus on things that doesn't get a majority of the share. I don't really believe in these like niche software models or niche search engine models or niche anything when it comes to marketing. I want to find the C where everybody's going. That's like the critical thing. Just like a restaurant isn't going to open up in a desert, restaurants are going to open up. They're going to have success where people are sending foot traffic. So in this case right now, it's ChatGPT. And if you're interested in this, go about your week this week and just try the simple exercise. What AI do you use? Or have you heard of ChatGPT? The real explosive models is when you ask somebody who you may think may not know anything at all, like an older person or somebody that's retired or somebody that may not be doing marketing. And if you ask them, what AIs have you heard of? And they're going to say, well, I use ChatGPT. That's why I'm mainly focusing a lot of our content, or a lot of the communications I'm making on GPT, because that's where I think the world is really going to go. So with that being said, we are utilizing this information to optimize our clients' websites for answers engine optimization. Now, often in our videos, I get asked what tools we use. So there's a couple of tools that I'm going to use in the presentation today. One is SplashDash, and this is actually my tool. And I used a couple of reports that guided a lot of the content here. The first one is the GPT visibility report, which allows me to see on a simulated amount of responses how often a client shows up for GPT visibility. A marketplace overview, which allows me to see who their competitors are in a marketplace via Google Maps. A sentiment analysis that allows me to see how people are mentioning different things, their customer sentiment. So the business, I'm going to showcase to you what people are saying about them. And then top pages report. As I talked about the 20-80 rule, 80-20 rule, vice versa, you're going to want to focus on the things that are generating the results. So wireframing, I'm using something called v0.app. So the strategy that I'm going to show you today is going to allow you to take some of these ideas, these proprietary keyword ideas, and turn them into functional wireframes really quickly. And then if you like what you see, you can start developing that and start getting results from it. And then the third tool that I'm using today is called Zapier. So this allows you to create workflows, generate keyword ideas, and turn form into data, form data into real data. And so I'm going to show you some AI workflows that I use to really execute this process for the long term. Now, I want to be super clear with you guys that the strategy I'm going to show you today is completely unique. This is not something that I've learned somewhere. This is not something that I'm stealing from somebody else. This is specifically something that I use every single day. Now, the reason why I'm showcasing to you guys SplashDash is because when you execute, you want to measure against, right? You don't want to work out for 3 months and then not measure how much weight you've lost, how much muscle you've gained. That's just a waste of your time. You want to get focused on measurement. If you're working with clients, I've said this in a past video, that you are always trying to win their business. Just because they said yes once doesn't mean they need to use you in the future. In fact, loyalty almost doesn't mean anything. You've probably been hurt in your life by somebody who you thought were loyal to you, but in reality, they went behind your back. This just happens. So don't be offended by that. Don't be offended by the fear of loss of love, which is a very common thing I've found. When somebody leaves me now, I try to understand, and then I just come to that agreement. And so if someone I really want to keep on, I don't let them leave. And I'm going to show you exactly today how to do that. Is if you really love somebody, your goal is to not let them leave you. And so with digital marketing, that relationship and how you communicate that relationship is absolutely critical. So let's get back into the content here. So as we go through this, we're going to talk about queries, not keywords. Users are now typing in long queries, like I mentioned before. For example, the one I said, I was asked at a bar and asked how they found the place, and the person said ChatGPT. And that was really cool to see. And it allowed me to start the conversation, understand their attribution. So if we look at traditional keywords, the typical thing that somebody will type in is things like vineyards near me, best vineyard, romantic vineyard, book vineyard, what wines, etc. These are traditional keyword phrases. And the intent doesn't really change here. People are still looking for local. They're looking for comparison. They're looking for specific. They want to buy something. They want education. And they want direct interest. Now, I've mentioned this before. When you're doing marketing, you've got to understand you're not the only guy on the planet that's doing it. And you've got to really take an appreciation for capitalism. Now, I'm not trying to sit here and tell you that I'm this Republican monster that loves capitalism, but I do believe that capitalism allows people to have their own unique choice for things. When you sit back and really think about that, it's not your right to be in business. It's a privilege to be in business. Just like it's not your right to drive a car, it's a privilege to drive your car. You start seeing the world and your client's world a little bit differently. You start becoming the Michelangelo that understands you need to sculpt them in a way that's going to get people to raise their hand and choose them. And the reason why someone chooses them is unique to them. It's your job to find out why they're unique. So understanding that, when you sculpt them in a way that's going to get the consumer to choose them, you become a really good marketing professional. So understand that when you advertise, when you market, when you make a website, whatever it is that you do, somebody has an option. You don't see that person. We only pay attention to the things we can see, right? We don't see the unseen. And so you don't see how they're making those decisions. So if you're in marketing and you get the chance, the privilege, really, it's not a chance, it's a privilege to talk to one of your customers or to talk to one of your clients' customers, if you're doing marketing for a customer, ask them their attribution story. What made you make this decision right now? Why did you choose this company over the sea of companies in the world? And I'm going to show you one of the questions that I love asking. And it's, you could be anywhere in the world right now, but you chose to be here. Why? And when you ask that question, people typically, they'll sit back and they'll go, that's a really good question. I could be doing this. I could be doing laundry. I could be on vacation. I could be at work. Instead, I'm at this business enjoying myself. Or instead, I'm having a plumber at my house doing this. Instead, I'm getting ready to go to this wedding. Like, really make the person think about their decision. And that'll tell you their attribution story. And that's a common theme I'm seeing with AI is the brands that communicate their stories are going to win because they're not just queries. They're not just traditional keywords matching a URL. It's really more storytelling. So let's get into that. As I mentioned before, AI and LLM queries are typically longer. So people are asking what, how, and who, right? They're asking which, they're asking show me, and they're getting really specific with the information. As I mentioned in the beginning, when I asked that person at the brewery how they found the business, a typical what they told me was is they talked into their phone and they gave it a couple of sentences. And so, typically speaking, you can expect an average ChatGPT query, and SplashDash is doing a lot of research on how people are actually searching this information, is going to ask a question and it's going to be in a longer form piece of content. So if you were to understand them side by side, Google's using a keyword, traditional SEO is using keyword, new AEO is using query. Users are typing, new AEO people are asking, they're talking to their phones, they're literally having a conversation. Your business is being put into a conversation. Keep that in mind. The optimization target from Google and old SEO or traditional SEO was page rank. The new one is everything is in context. And I talked about that, how we should be telling a story rather than trying to target a keyword. The ranking signal in search was backlinks, click-through rate, and dwell time. The new one is how relevant can your content be to their query? What is your reputation? And understanding entity data, such as which citations are mentioning your business and your competition's business. And your goal, and this is, I think, is the one that's most difficult for people to understand, is your goal now isn't clicks, it's visibility. Your goal is to get mentioned in the conversation. Your goal is to have positive sentiment analysis. Your goal is to be the name that's mentioned when people are talking about these things. And advertising is by far the best way to do that because you don't have time to create cute, funny social media videos all day. You're a busy business person trying to get shit done because you want to make more money, because you're in this for profit. You're not in this to have fun. Okay. That's why we work. That's why we have business. No one in our ancestors' time went out hunting because they wanted to show off and be cool and have fun. No, the family needed to eat. And so understand that if you want to get into the conversation with people, you need to understand what the 20% of the activities that you're going to do is going to yield 80% of the results. And the 80% of the activities that you're currently doing that's yielding 20% of your results, you've got to remove those like Michelangelo does. So let's get back into the actual presentation here. So that's the difference there. Now, LLMs are recommending brands, and lucky for you, I have some good news for you. 44% of citations came from first-party websites. That means your website is absolutely critical. Now, there was so much propaganda around 2020, 2019, when there was all of these single-page landing page softwares coming out. ClickFunnels, Lead Pages, Go High Level, all of these different tools that are out there. Amazing softwares. And in fact, I strive to be like them one day. What I'm talking about, though, is there's a lot of these agencies that will set up landing pages externally for the client's business. And that doesn't do the brand anything. That's not a system that they own. History has shown that the website is the most powerful marketing mechanism that you can have as a business. Here's why. One, LLMs are looking at your website. So LLMs, they need the source of truth. Where can you get a business's confirmed source of truth? You can't get it from Facebook. You can't get it from Yelp. You can get it from places like Instagram or X, right? But those social posts, they're old. They could be old. The most reliable place for a business to control their messaging is through their website. So whenever I talk to a customer, a lot of them brush off the idea that the website's that important. And the reason for that is they don't understand their customers' buying journey, and they don't look at their business as a story. They look at their business as a transactional thing and a means for them to go on their boat over the weekend. They don't look at it as I'm changing people's lives. A lot of them do. I don't want to say everybody. I don't want to stereotype this. That's not the truth. But the majority that I talk to, I've realized really just see it as a mechanism of making money. They don't make it deeper than it actually is. They don't realize that before somebody got to their website, there was so much of a story prior to that. But the fact of the matter is the website is the only place that you can communicate your brand effectively as you. And Facebook, Instagram can't ban your website. That's just not going to happen. Now, content management systems could ban your content and could ban your website, but that's very rare. This happened to Kanye West when he was saying all of his Hitler remarks with Shopify. Shopify said, you can't use our product anymore, as they should have, right? I mean, that's a choice that they made as a brand. That's a decision they made as a brand. And so the website is a single source of truth. So if you're in the website business, it's a great time to be in there because AI loves it. The second thing is listings are close behind that. 42% of listings are actually, 42% of LLMs are recommending listings. Only 8% is social. And I have my own opinions about organic social, and I'm going to talk about that in a future video. I actually don't even recommend doing it too much if you're a busy person who has busy time. But if you have somebody that's internal and that's part of your strategy, and that's great, the likelihood of you succeeding on social is very little. Forums are just 2%. As you guys probably saw, Reddit has taken a really big hit on how it's being recommended, and it looks like brands are favoring 44% of citations. The irony in that is so funny. And the reason for that is because when AI recommends Reddit and someone says the best way to kill yourself is by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, that's not something an AI wants to recommend. So Reddit has so much humor in it that it's hard to give good advice from. So that's a big challenge that LLMs have. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do Reddit because it's still citing a lot of Reddit stuff, but it's citing stuff that are not really business related. It's cited stuff like music, theatrical, movies, opinions, things like that. But for business, the website is critical. So I recommend optimizing your website as much as possible. And this is the thing that you really got to realize too is Gemini is favoring websites 52.1%, where OpenAI is looking at listings. Don't even look at the other one, right? Not many people are using Perplexity that are the typical consumer that's just going to go to a bar and have a beer or buy from your business. It depends on your business, of course. However, if you look at Gemini, if you have a website that's talking to listings, you're already doing most of the things that are correct. And this goes back to doing 20% of the work that's critical and ignoring the 80%. So as an agency who's delivering services, I'm going to talk to you about what that looks like. But really, that starts with understanding market sentiment. What do people value when it comes to the market sentiment of a business? In this case, when I was analyzing 39 different competitors and analyzing 13,000 reviews, I took a look to see what was being mentioned the most and what do I really need to focus on. Well, in a positive sentiment, people were mentioning top terms from top to lowest: beautiful, wine, staff, tasting, atmosphere, area. They had music. They had different types of wine. They felt good. They had a good selection. They had live music. They went in the afternoon. This type of information is going to allow me to skip a lot of the research process. And it's going to allow me to understand how LLMs want to view information or structure on a website. If I'm making this customer's website, in this case, of this market research that I just did, I might consider making sure that we have sections on the website for all of those different things that AIs can easily analyze. And as long as it's on a website and it's not on some backend thing that somebody has to log into, which shouldn't be the case anyways, that's the challenge with social media. And AI can crawl social media, but a lot of the times for you to see an X post, for you to see a Reddit post, for you to see an Instagram post, the AI would have to log into it. So the website, it makes it so much easier for the LLM to pick up on this information. Now, if you're in the website business, that should ring alarm bells. Businesses need to update their websites. Now, I've mentioned this book called Scientific Advertising multiple times, and the reason why I love it is because it mentions something about business owners that he was working with and that I work with that I see often is we fail to realize how little the public understands about our business and our service. We fail to communicate. We assume that people are just going to know about us, trip into our front door, and offer us money for what we do. We fail to realize all of the unique and amazing things that we have because we don't communicate them. So the more we can communicate, the more LLMs are going to pick you up. Now, if you can communicate to a level like I was just showing you here, where you're actually communicating to a level of what the market values, not just what you value as your own brand, you're going to be able to stand out from a lot of the competition and get recommended more frequently inside of the LLMs. Queries are unpredictable. In this example, I searched reviews and we got TripAdvisor, MapQuest, and BirdEye. That is a direct indication of why it's important to become omnipresent in a lot of these different places. In a previous video, I talked about getting reviews in different places, understanding the average amount of reviews for a certain platform, beating that, and then adjusting your focus. But imagine a world where MapQuest is recommending businesses in one of the largest, I should say, the largest AI algorithm. Well, that's happening right now in ChatGPT. So we may want to think about, do we have the MapQuest login and can we get people to leave us reviews on this place? Because it's picking up that information. Back to the stat I showed you prior, that ChatGPT is recommending citations more than it's recommending websites. Really critical information to know. When you do your visibility scores, you can use SplashDash to do this really quickly. You're going to simulate a bunch of terms and you're going to get how high of a visibility that typically is for the typical consumer. In this case, it was a 61% out of, 30 out of 49 prompts. And these were for queries related to the term vineyard. When I talk to you about the new SEO strategy that I'm implementing, you're going to see that when we add information, we test it by doing GPT visibilities or testing Google search results to see if that information's now being cited. Because what is happening right now is we as marketing professionals cannot predict how people are going to type into these different LLMs. That's why we need to listen to what's going on in our brand so we can get ahead of the curve. So I'm going to talk to you about future proofing a lot of your strategy based on a couple of things that I'm doing here. But once we do that work, I need to be able to test against that. And so that's where visibility reports really come into play, especially for ChatGPT. So when we do that, we start to see that we can see how much we're coming up. Now, niche specific citations are also going to be available in these GPT visibility reports. So you can clearly see, for example, in this case, this CT wine trail is going to be one of the critical things that we need to optimize. That's the 20% of the work that we need to do to actually get results. That is a clear thing, a clear indication. It's not even looking at their website in this case, where we need to make sure that that information on that page is well optimized. So a lot of these publishers that work on these different websites are happy to talk to you, because if I was a publisher in one of these third-party websites, now would be the time to reign. So what I would do is I would take this data that I'm showing you here. I might even just take my video and send it to somebody and then say, look, this is how people are recommending you. You should increase your package. You're going to get more GPT visibility. So more to come on that in the near future, but it's definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot more. And visibility reports show you the citations that are really critical at a market level. So in this case, like one I showed you in a couple days ago for Tree, is showing Yelp. Now that business hasn't logged into Yelp in years. They've ignored Yelp since the LLMs became popular up until we signed them. And when we showed them this information, they were in shock. And they were in shock for two reasons. Is one, they hate Yelp. And that's like most businesses that are out there, because they don't understand Yelp's complex review algorithm. The irony of that is Yelp does that to protect the platform, but we hate it. So there's just a ton of irony in trying to be helpful and then somebody actually not liking it. But the second thing is, when we do that, the customer's information is all incorrect on Yelp. There's no photos, there's no optimization, there's no tags, there's no owner info, there's no structured data. So the first task that we have after multiple citation reports that we pull, Yelp is the important citation for that business in that area, because you cannot look at this globally. You cannot look at this as just a random guess. You can't just say, businesses that recommend tree services and LLMs typically include this. You have to look at that business's specific zip code, its competition, etc. If you don't want to gamble, that is. If you want to gamble, go to the casino. But if you want to have accurate, predictable results and you want to sound scientific when you're talking to your prospects, this is the way to do it. So the first thing that we did was we corrected that information, and now we're updating it by getting photos and videos and making sure Yelp is one of the things that we're looking at when we're publishing information about this business online. So really, really critical information there. Now, when you get specific, the site search engines love citing specific content that gets mentioned. For example, look at the query above, how long it is, and then look at the actual search result that's showing up for it and the AI overview that's showing up for it. If AIs have the specific information for them to fetch and return a result, that's going to give you a high confidence score that it's going to show up in the actual search results. Now, for a keyword research tool to actually target this, you're probably going to get a result that says 0, and that's okay. You're not really looking at that anymore. You're looking at your own data to make these decisions. If we were to look at and search in Google Keyword Planner or whatever keyword tool you're using for that type of query, you're really going to get no results. But as we start to really make these topic-specific landing pages for the queries that we're finding from our customers' data, we start to get results from it, and the proof of the pudding is there. This is an example of that page getting leads. I actually went ahead and just took out a lot of the information of the actual contact info, so you don't have that. Not that you guys have the time to call these people. You have much better things to do, like go do better AEO for your clients. However, you can see that it's referencing that exact landing page, and these are optimal leads that are going to come into this business. Traditional keyword tools are going to tell you this is going to get you 0 results, right? Well, how ridiculous is that? The people that are contacting this business, I don't know what they're closing out of that. I don't know how much revenue they're generating from that. I can tell you this, that page is nowhere visible on the website. So however they're getting to that page could be of two different ways. One is an ad. If it is an ad, that's a hyper-specific ad, because if it's a hyper-specific reason we've found people want this business to do for them. So, and then the second one is recommendations from the search engine and the actual LLMs. You want a good mix of both. You don't want to just rely on one. However, if I used traditional keyword research, I would have instead of invested my time in some blog article or a website page or content that nobody's even going to care about. When multiple users tell you they want something from a business, it's usually a good indication that there's more people like that just haven't communicated with you yet. And in fact, this goes back to just being definite as a brand. When I was reading and starting in marketing, probably 2018, I read a book. I don't even remember the name of it, but I remember all the concepts of it. And one of the main concepts was how Zappos, the shoe company, they had people, women specifically, asking them if they made shoes that were really small because these women had really small feet. So most brands said, nah, we just focus on regular people feet. But Zappos kept hearing this information. And that was an indication to them that they needed to make a decision as a brand to focus heavily on making shoes for women that have small feet. Fast forward a decade, Zappos got bought out for $1 billion or whatever the buyout was. I know it was in the B's by Amazon because they kept listening to their customer. You want to think about your keyword research strategy or your idea strategy or your topic strategy by listening to your customers. That's going to be the best way you're going to get success. No keyword research tool is going to tell you that out there. So going at that, when we ran a specified GPT visibility report, as you can see at the top, it says visibility analysis for 25 restaurants for small gatherings, GPT results. You see that the confidence score is very high after we made the page. Now, a lot of the keywords here, the prompts, came back with just the home page, and that's okay. But a significant portion of them were actually focused on that page that we made because we kept seeing people were asking for this specific term, small gatherings. As I do this, I'm going to show the customer this information because we spent time and effort doing it. If you have an idea, if you have an execution, if you did something, if you launched an ad, if you launched a video, if you sent an email, your work is not done after you shoot the basketball. Your work is done after it lands or doesn't land to really think about why and tell a story behind it. If you do the exercise, if you do the task, if you launch the ad and you're done, it's a fatal mistake, especially if you're working with clients. Because think about it this way. They gave me money. I decided to do this. Now I need to give them evidence that it's working. And if it's not, brush it under the rug. And think about that. Most communication that you do is biased based on what you want to show and what you don't want to show. Just like what you do in private is very different than how you act in public. And so with your marketing relationship, you want to continually prove your value. So every time we make an execution, we'll showcase to the customer or myself, if it's my own execution, I'm going to try to keep confirming as to why what we did was the right move. Because if you're following a strategy, there's no move that you can make that's the wrong move, as long as you've made a decision. The decision is the key principle there. Now, you want to monitor when you're being mentioned. So in this case, you can see which ones we were being mentioned, and I can see how we were being mentioned there. However, if I'm not being mentioned in certain things, I want to take a look at that. Many times, a lot of this won't be applicable to you or your client, and it's really important for you to understand that because you don't want to focus on the things that are not applicable to you. For example, I don't know if they allow bring your own beer, but it's a good topic of conversation that I can have with the business and our future conversations if we have a lower visibility score for this page. But this allows me to see through the lens of ChatGPT of what it wants to see me talking about specifically on that page. And I can use the sentiment to guide those decisions. So what you're looking at right now is what GPT mentioned from the most common terms to the lowest in its responses. It's no shocker, it's no surprising fact that at the bottom of what it mentioned were liquor laws. I don't think people search for restaurants understanding or looking for if they have liquor laws. I think anybody that's searching that may not want to go there. Instead, they want to investigate it. But at the top, you can see the top term is private. So if GPT searched 25 queries in this case, or 50 queries in this case, and the word that it responds with the most in most of its simulated responses is private, it's a good indication to you that the website, the keywords, the SEO that you want to target, you want to talk about how you have private options because most users and the LLMs are probably going to be looking for that. So you're not really doing keyword research. You're trying to see how you can fit into the natural conversation that people can have with these LLMs. So sentiment is a really popular way of doing that. It's a really strong way of doing it too. Now, when I use leads for our clients, typically what I'll do is I'll use Zapier to read all of their form responses. Zapier will analyze a lot of that information, and then I'll get recommendations directly formatted by Zapier. So if you haven't used Zapier before, I highly recommend you check it out. But in this case, what I did was I took Duda, new form submission comes in, then Zapier says, okay, what did that form submission say? From there, it'll say, hey, Ruan, this is what you should do. If I like the idea, some ideas I don't like, I'll turn that into a clear wireframe using v0.app, the app that I showed you in the beginning of the video, of what that would look like on an actual landing page. And from there, I'll take that, I'll ask the client a few questions, and then I'll immediately put it into development. For these kinds of things, you don't want to wait. And in fact, if you're working with a customer that you've already gotten good results for, there's actually almost no reason for you to get approval on things. Just go, right? There's a little thing about selling, right? Which is if you are trying to convince, you're losing. If you are already delivering while you're selling, you're winning. Because the worst thing that someone can do if they don't approve something is they could just have you correct it, but at least you took the action to get it done. Most times, if you understand the brand that you're working with, you could probably just work autonomously. Now, for little technical things that you're going to have questions for, you want to show them things quickly. So that's why I rapidly iterate with V0 app, because it allows me to take this structured data. For example, somebody fills out a contact form, Zapier says, here's what you should add to the website. I can take that and then wireframe it in seconds with AI. And now I can show people what we're thinking about and giving them a chance to correct it. So before it actually gets published, before it goes onto the internet, the client's actually doing the quality assurance. The client's actually telling me what to say and what not to say. So when I publish that, I'm basically guaranteed results. So in essence, going back to that slide, what I'm doing is I'm taking a lot of data from my customers' forums and calls. I'm having Zapier take a look at that and analyze it. And then I'm turning that into new pages so that I can increase the sentiment analysis scores when I add that content to the website directly, which is going to get them recommended in the large language models. So real-time information is absolutely critical when it comes to this. And the only time you're going to look at real-time information or get ideas for real-time information is by taking a look and seeing what people are actually saying in the contact form submissions themselves. There was a really good book. It's called Getting Real by Jason Fried. It's about software engineering. And he basically says, don't listen to any of your feedback from your customers. The reason for that is because while it sounds archaic and it sounds ridiculous, what he's really saying is anything that really is important, you will keep hearing. So it's not going to be a one-time event. What you should do is what people keep saying to improve your product. So for example, if we have a feature request or if the client has an idea for their website, ask about the basis of that idea. If their idea was to do X, Y, and Z, I would probably say, why did you come up with that? And then from there, I can assess if it's a good idea or not. If the idea says, oh, 50 people have come up to us this week and asked if we accept walk-ins, that's our next marketing idea. If one person came in and they said, hey, do you have this specific type of product? That's not a good marketing idea. You only have a defined amount of time in your day. So if you want to get good at doing it 20%, that's going to get the results. Start listening to your customers in a way that's going to make sense. So for us, for DevelopMark, for SplashDash, for my clients, I find that information through our contact forms, through our conversations, through the phone calls that we have. So the moment we execute something, I know if the business owner asks me why I did that, I have a reason and I have an answer for it. So it's a really good way of looking at and seeing how you can get that information. So for this one, there was a lot of talk about music. And if you can add interactivity wherever possible, the wireframes will allow you to do that. It's going to allow you to create a much better product. These AI apps have done such a good job of allowing you to showcase to somebody what something could look like. There's no reason you shouldn't have interactivity directly on your website. So pricing calculators, calendars, examples of submitting something and AI creating something for you. Things like having a painting website and allowing customers to edit or upload their photo and paint the walls of that room. That type of interactivity, AI is going to love recommending because it's truly unique. So if you can do that, follow it and execute it. Traditional SEO is still important. Most recommended stuff in the LLMs are still going to pick the businesses that have a lot of traditional SEO factors working well. This isn't because LLMs look at Google. This isn't because SEO is the same, because it's not. It's really not. This is because a lot of the key things, getting your brand mentioned in contextual conversations, hasn't changed since our ancestors have been there. To get mentioned in conversations, you have to do noble things. You have to communicate. You have to share how you feel. When you do those kinds of things, you get mentioned. So the more you can get mentioned, that affects all of your marketing and advertising, not just LLMs. So if you're doing the traditional things in SEO, the 20% that's going to get you mentioned in the LLMs, the 80% of the things probably aren't that important. And those things are the technical SEO, the internal linking, things like adding blog articles just to target a keyword. For the things that don't have any substance around them, those things aren't going to be popular in the near future. So try to avoid being commoditized and focus on the traditional SEO factors that actually matter. Going back to being busy and productive, what's a productive thing that you can do for one of your customers today? What's a busy thing you can do for one of your customers today? Automate the busy, focus on the productive. And as I mentioned before, a large study that was done showcased that authority still remains key. And if you follow domain rating and domain authority, which is a metric that is completely simulated, it allows you to see how up things are going, how down things are going. And really what that scale is how powerful that business is in Google's term. There really hasn't been a domain rating or domain authority equivalent for LLMs right now. I'm sure there's a lot of tools working on that, but they really, really work well together. So generally speaking, the higher the domain authority is, the higher you're going to be mentioned inside of those LLMs. The best way to increase that domain authority is to get links and mentions offside of your website pointing to your website. Social media, backlinks, guest post articles, press releases, things along those lines. So back to what I was talking about before, and this next section kind of covers that really well, which is websites don't really get a lot of traffic. And congrats, they're going to get a lot less traffic. As I mentioned before, the metric is not visibility. The metric is not clicks anymore, it's visibility. And so if you want your website to gain more visibility, you've got to be okay with the fact that less people are going to visit it. That's why I'm a heavy proponent on advertising, because it gets a ton of people to your website really quickly for a really inexpensive cost. Most people advertise and they're just gambling. They have no strategy. There's no purpose. They don't understand that the result of advertising is getting a customer for a fraction of what they were willing to pay for it. So I was sitting at dinner the other day and we were talking about digital marketing and software and things like that. And the person sitting in front of me was a consultant and they did healthcare consulting, etc. And so he said, how much money should I spend on ads? Which is like the age-old question when it comes to advertising, right? You've probably heard that multiple times. And I said, hold on a second, breathe. After we did that, the room was clear. And then I said, how much are you willing to pay for a customer? And he goes to me and he goes, nobody's ever asked that to me before. And I said, if you want the answer to the first question, how much are you willing to pay for a customer? And he said, okay. And I walked him through it. How much do you make on a customer? He said 50 grand for the year. I said, okay, you make $50,000 for the customer. Out of that 50,000, if you could spend a certain amount to just get more of those every single month or every year, or whatever the fraction was, what would you spend? He said $10,000. And I said, there's your advertising budget. And it made him feel so clear about the conversation that we were having that he's really excited to run ads now. So if you're in business or you're in your client's business and you get asked, how much money should I spend on ads? The real answer is, how much are you willing to pay for a customer? If they understand their lifetime value, if they get $50,000 over the term of 5 years from a customer, or maybe it's a lot less than that, that'll give you your answer of how much you should spend on advertising. Because then the next question becomes, how many customers do you want? Okay, if you're going to spend $10,000 to get 1 customer and you want 10 customers this year, you now have your advertising budget. Now, the way we strategically approach that is focused on all the scientific principles that I teach on this channel. But mainly what you're looking to do is you're looking to tell the business to take a step back, because the advertising budget really comes down to what they're looking to get out of it. So in essence, most advertising budgets go to a few key pages on a website. That's the pages that you should really focus on. This year at DevelopMark, we started making websites that are way smaller. And at first, it seemed like this abstract idea. Like there's a whole business, but it has 1 page on the website. That's ridiculous. Websites have hundreds of pages. Websites are internal, they're in depth. But when we look at the analytics, where the conversions are really coming from is the homepage. So let me talk about that for just a second, because there is decision paralysis. There is analysis paralysis. When a user goes to a website, you're going to have to tell them what to do if you want to get results. Once we started doing this, traffic decreased, but quality increased. And which one is worth more to you? Which one can you actually take to the bank? The website that's getting 10,000 visitors just to make people feel good? Or is it the website that's generating revenue and that you can attribute it to it? The money is going to allow you to pay for your living expenses. you're not going to have to fear poverty because money's coming in through your website or your client's website. Therefore, you can live a normal, responsible life. So let's take a look at this for just a second so I can show you some of the data behind this. When we run top pages for a website, this is a client's website that's going live in a couple of days. We look and see that most of the traffic are going to a lot of these pages that A, get a bunch of traffic from outside countries or states, or B, really has no intention of driving them to their main business results at all. When we make a website, we're really thinking about the budget that's going towards that website. And I want to explain that really quickly. So if you think about this, the budget that's going to the website is where are we spending a lot of our resources. So on this website, for example, the budget is going directly to the homepage. When we look at the business's current website, the budget, in essence, where their energy is going to a bunch of other pages that are really not that relevant and not generating any results for the business. So because of that, when we create a website page, we're really focusing in on the sentiment analysis, the long form video sales copy, a lot of the critical things that we know after talking to their customers and reading all of the data that we find inside of SplashDash, what people are really going to care about and making the website way smaller. If you notice a couple of things, just by looking at the menu, you can see it's a lot simpler than looking at the website that looks like this menu. And there's nothing wrong with the business that made this website because this just was the way to make websites a few years ago. It was all about having a ton of pages. It was all about having covered every single topic potentially on the planet. The problem with that is when you do that, you start to focus on the things that are not generating the results. It's always driven me crazy on human nature, how we will devalue the people that give us a time and attention, but we overvalue the things we don't have. It's always made no sense. Why create a new article on some website when you could focus on the things that people are already looking at? So optimize those things. And you see it everywhere when we do the data before we take on a customer. You can see that a lot of websites in this case, for example, this one's called New England Spring. This is a website that we're making right now. You can see that most of the traffic is actually just going to the homepage. So when we redo the website, when we're selling our case for the homepage, we use SplashDash, run a top pages report, and just let them know where we're going to focus a lot of our efforts on. Now, it's important to know that a lot of this data is third party. If you're going to have access to their actual analytics, in some sales conversations, you may not. So that's why I'm showing you this example. You may be able to see a lot of that information directly inside of the analytics of the website and optimize the pages that are getting traffic. So when we do that information, we're looking at these large site maps that are completely out of date. Why even have a page on the website if the priority is 20%? Focus on the 100%. You're going to get a lot more return if you focus on just that. So building with intention is really important. So anything that we do before we actually start building is we start asking these difficult questions because it seems risky at first, but once you test it a few times, you start realizing it is so breathtaking to do less. It is so breathtaking to be simple. To be simple is difficult. To be complicated is easy. That's what makes or breaks a good marketing professional. Good marketing people make things simple. Bad marketing people, they want to be complicated. You see this in our entire journey when we're working on marketing. When you started, right? If you're looking at this video right now, think about when you started marketing. You were trying to put everything you possibly could on a website. You were trying to put everything you possibly could on a social post. Your posts had too much text. They had way too many graphics. You look at this with photographers, amateur photographers, crazy increase the saturation. When MySpace was a thing, you saw that everybody's photos looked completely not like their photo because the saturation was high, the hue was high, it was black and white. There was things coming down the page. And then Facebook really understood simplicity. And when you looked at it initially, you were like, this is weird. This is not as complicated as MySpace, but I like it more. And that simplicity is going to win overall over time. So when you look at an amateur and when you look at a professional, the amateur is trying to do everything. The professional is sticking to what they're really good at, their zone of genius, if you would say. So really think about what can you simplify when you're going about these marketing tactics. Curate, don't add. We talked about the difference of curation and adding previously. The difference between a museum and what the art that they put on their wall is they've said no to a lot of things. So say no more. And I told you how to say no more in this video, especially when it comes to marketing. That's, by the way, any advice that I give on this channel has nothing to do with anything outside of digital marketing. I'm not an expert in anything else other than digital marketing and myself. Ruan Marino, I'm an expert at, and digital marketing. Those are the two things in my life that I decided to become an expert at. Everything else, don't listen to anything I have to say, whether it's political, whether it's video games, whether it's life. I have no idea what's going on. Just like you have no idea what's going on, However, this is the zone of genius that I decided to work with. So any concept that I give you is specifically focused to this. So let's get back to it. You're responsible regardless. And I really wanted you to think about this one more time, is that regardless of how many keywords, pages, blogs, or articles you create, you are responsible for one thing, and that is getting more customers. Having that one clear offer, one clear conversion path, telling the user exactly what to do is what's going to get them the results, as you can see. So if you guys enjoyed this video, let me know what else you want me to talk about. If not, I have a couple more ideas that I have coming up specifically related to the scientific advertising process, the LLM optimization process, and just being a steward marketing professional in general. I appreciate you guys watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.